Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month decks. This is deck number 17 and it's titled Power Couple. And if you've missed out on the first few, weeks at this point of these deck techs, what we are doing is making a Magic the Gathering commander deck using two non-partner commanders, building on a budget of $100 or less, and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ+ community every day for all of June. So our partner commanders today are two of the more powerful ones that I could find. We have the Gitrog monster and Borborygmos Enraged. So the Gitrog monster, 3 black-green for a 6/6 legendary creature frog horror. It's got Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. Then, the Gitrog monster's partner is Borborygmos Enraged, which is 4 red, green for a 7/6 legendary creature Cyclops. He's got Trample. When he deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top 3 cards of your library, put all land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Then, you can discard a land card, and Borborygmos Enraged deals 3 damage to any target. So you can probably already see some of the initial synergies between our two commanders, being able to discard a land with Borborygmos, deal 3 damage to any target, and then draw a card with the Gitrog monster, already very powerful, but we do have some other things going on in this deck as well. So let's take a look at some of our themes for today and break down what it is we're trying to do. Our first theme is going to be, of course, getting cards into our graveyard, and one of the best ways we can do that is with Dredge from Golgari Grave Troll, which is 4 and a green for a 0/0 troll skeleton. Golgari Grave Troll enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. Then, you can pay 1 and remove a +1/+1 counter from it to regenerate it, and it has Dredge 6. So the way that Dredge would work is if we would draw a card, not when, but if we would draw a card, then we will Dredge 6, basically mill the top 6 cards of our library, put them directly into our graveyard, and then instead of drawing the card, take the Golgari Grave Troll from our graveyard and put it into our hand. This can be incredibly powerful if we can find, say, lands that have Dredge. We can actually combine our commanders, so that way when we would draw a card with the Gitrog monster, we instead Dredge the land to our hand, then we can discard it to Borborygmos, and then Dredge again. So there are ways for this to go semi-infinite. I don't think it can technically go fully infinite, but it can get pretty close. So that is something to be aware of building around this deck. Moving on to our second theme of the deck, we of course have landfall. Since we are playing around with so many lands, caring about lands going to the graveyard, caring about lands coming into play, we want to make sure that we have things to do with lands, like Nesting Dragon, which is 3 red for a 5/4 dragon with flying, and of course, landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, create a 0/2 red dragon egg creature token with Defender, and when this token dies, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying, and pay a red. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So that's a lot of text, but basically we get a 0/2 egg that turns into a 2/2 dragon every time we play a land. And that is very powerful. It's a great way to kind of synergize with everything we're doing. It's a great way to give us some attackers or blockers if we need them. But Nesting Dragon, one of the better landfall effects in the deck. Moving on to our third theme for today, this one is returning lands from our graveyard. Since our goal is to really put as many lands into the graveyard as possible, both with Borborygmos and with the Gitrog monster, we also want to have effects like Aftermath Analyst to get those lands back. Because Aftermath Analyst is 1 and a green for a 1/3 elf detective. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. Then you can pay 3 and a green and sacrifice the Analyst to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So if we put, say, 10 lands in our graveyard, and then activate the Analyst, we can get all 10 lands back all at once, triggering all of our landfall effects, triggering anything else that may be going on, and putting us in a position where we then have more lands to sacrifice with Gitrog Monster, lands that we can return to our hand with bounce effects and things like that, so that way we can trigger Borborygmos, and it really just sets our game plan into a turbo mode. That, though, is all of our themes for today. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some key cards in this deck. And some of the key cards in here are win conditions or value engines, but a lot of times would be the most valuable cards in the deck. Not necessarily money-wise, but gameplay-wise. So our first key card is Countryside Crusher, which is 1 red for a 3/3 giant warrior. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it into your graveyard and repeat this process. And whenever a land card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Countryside Crusher. Given how often lands will be going into our graveyard, it is not unlikely that this gets upwards of 15 to 20 power over the course of just a couple of turns. And yes, it doesn't have any natural evasion, but that doesn't mean that we don't have ways to give it evasion, and it also doesn't mean that just having a big beater isn't going to win the game in some cases, because there are chances that our opponents don't have any blockers or something like that. But Countryside Crusher is a great way for us to get lands into our graveyard with the upkeep trigger, and a great win condition when we've put plenty of lands into our graveyard. Our next key card that I want to talk about is going to be Soul of Windgrace. And Soul of Windgrace is 1 black-red-green for a 5/4 legendary creature cat avatar. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard, does not have to be our graveyard, onto the battlefield tapped under your control. Then it has 3 abilities. For 1 green, you can discard a land card and gain 3 life. For 1 and a red, you can discard a land card to draw a card, and for 2 and a black, you can discard a land card. Soul of Windgrace gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. This is one of those cards that really does everything that our deck is trying to do. And one of the nice things is, because when it enters the battlefield, the trigger for it goes on the stack, you can actually use one of its abilities while it's on the stack to discard a card and get it back if there are no other lands in the graveyards. However, there's almost always going to be lands in the graveyards, and giving us ways to discard lands more than just Borborygmos, because Borborygmos is 7 mana, it's definitely going to be something that's relevant in the early game, or at least early to mid game. Moving on to our final key card, this one is Conduit of Worlds. And Conduit of Worlds is 2 green for an artifact that says you may play lands from your graveyard, and you can tap it and choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn, then activate it only as a sorcery. This kind of pulls double duty in this deck because 1, it lets us play lands from our graveyard, which is a very powerful ability given how many lands are going to be going to the graveyard, and it lets us cast our spells from the graveyard. And yes, we can only cast 1 thing the turn that we do that, but sometimes that's all we need, because we could cast Soul of Windgrace, for example, and then use his abilities to get more value, and while we're not casting other spells, we are still putting ourselves in a position where we're generating more value than our opponents. So to that end, I think Conduit of Worlds is probably the best card in the entire deck. That, though, brings us to the end of our key cards section. So the next thing I want to do is take a look at some cool interactions in this deck. And the first pair of cards that I want to highlight is going to be Splendid Reclamation and Morog Fury of Akum. So Splendid Reclamation, 3 and a green for a sorcery, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So very similar to Aftermath Analyst, just a way for us to get all of our lands back. And that is incredibly powerful powerful with landfall creatures like Morog, Fury of Akum, which is 4 red for a 6/6 legendary creature Minotaur warrior. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it is attacked this turn. And then of course, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. Now, it is very important when you're playing Morog that you trigger his landfall ability in your second main phase, so after your first combat, because if you trigger it in your first main phase, you will get your extra combat steps before your normal combat step, and your normal combat step will not untap your creatures. So you could put yourself in a position where you actually lose out on an additional combat step, and you have creatures that are already tapped and unable to untap, so be aware of that when you're playing Morog. Otherwise though, even if we Splendid Reclamation for, say, 3 lands to get back, which is not great with this deck, there are times when you're gonna get like 10 to 15 lands back, but even just 3 means you're getting 3 additional combat phases, so 4 total on one turn, and every single time your creatures attack, they're getting +1/+0, so by the end of it, they'll have +4/+0, and there's a very good chance that we've gone wide enough at this point with some of our token generators that we can very easily just run over our opponents and win the game on the spot. That, though, is only cool interaction number 1, so moving on to cool interaction number 2, in this case we have Springheart Nantuko and Cavalier of Thorns. So Springheart Nantuko, another very good card that I debated on putting into the keycard section, but I wanted to highlight this interaction instead. It is 1 and a green for a 1/1 enchantment creature insect monk, and it has Bestow for 1 and a green, so we can cast it on a creature as an aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and most importantly, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a green if Springheart Nantuko is attached to a creature you control. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. This is one of those cards that is very powerful basically on its own and attached to any creature in play, but the main card that we want to attach it to in this case is going to be Cavalier of Thorns, because it is 2 green for a 5/6 elemental knight. It has reach. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put a land card from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest into your graveyard. Then, when it dies, you may exile it, and if you do, put another target card from your graveyard on top of your library. The reason that this is going to be so powerful is because Springheart Nantuko can enchant the Cavalier of Thorns, so whenever we play a land, then we are able to pay 2 mana to make a copy of Cavalier of Thorns. Cavalier of Thorns will enter, reveal the top 5 cards of our library, and put a land from among them onto the battlefield. That will then trigger the landfall on Springheart Nantuko, letting us pay 2 mana to again copy the Cavalier of Thorns, which technically, because we just had a land enter, is now going to cost us essentially 1 mana because the land enters untapped. So if we can find a way to generate additional mana with each landfall, which we can do in this deck, it is very likely that this goes infinite. We make a ton of Cavalier of Thorns, we could mill out pretty much our entire deck, and then if we have things like the Gitrog monster and Porporigmos, we are putting those lands into the graveyard, we're triggering some of our synergies there, eventually we could start dredging things, and it just gets completely out of hand very, very quickly. So, with that being said, this is, again, not an infinite combo, but it's pretty darn close. Moving on though, to the final piece of our deck tech. This is the price of the deck, and today it came in at $92.51, with the most expensive card in the deck being 6 at $8.94. And 6 is 2 and a green for a 2/4 legendary creature Treefolk. It's got reach. Whenever 6 attacks, mill 3 cards, then you may put a land card from among them into your hand, and, as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have Retrace. And for those who don't know, Retrace essentially means that you can pay the mana of that card and also discard a land card to cast that spell from your graveyard. So this gives us a way to buy back all of our non-land permanents, plus it gives us a way to discard land cards, which is very powerful. It also helps us mill and puts lands into our hand, so it really just does everything we wanted to be doing. 6 is an incredibly powerful card, so I fought really hard to keep it in the deck. However, if you do need to trim for budget purposes, you can cut 6 for another landfall synergy or another mill synergy. It's just probably not going to be quite as good. That, though, brings us to the end of our deck tech for today, so thank you all so much to everybody for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons and channel members for all of your support, and if you would like to support the channel, you can always find us over on patreon.com or right here on YouTube as a channel member. Plus, you can always just like the video and subscribe to the channel. That does help out quite a bit as well. So thank you all so much for making it this far. I hope you have a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.